And also he's talking about communitarianism, which was a new word to me.
Okay, well, communitarianism is basically where individual rights are usurped by the rights of the community. Now, in some ways, that might sound quite a good thing, but what it's actually for is to impose a very totalitarian system, which we can see happening at the moment. We're in it at the very moment, and what we're seeing around us is the kind of endgame of communitarianism. In other words, absolute control and hive mind of the public and demonization of anything outside any official narrative. Now, this is called the common good. The rights of the community usurp the rights of the individual. And it all goes down to this idea, which came out of communism, actually. Communitarianism. In 1848, a fellow called John Goodwin Barnby coined the phrase communitarianism. And at that time, it meant ideas of a communistic nature. So in other words, it was born out of communism. So communism had a bit of a bad press. So they have this new term, communitarianism. You have a massive compliant population who are basically under the thumb of a ruling elite. It's quite a simple system. It's a technocratic system, and technocracy is the overarching kind of term which came out of the 1930s, the technocracy movement. Technocracy Inc. is still there. You can check it out. And the people who are imposing communitarianism are actually technocrats, because it all comes out of sustainable development. And John Goodwin Barnby, who coined the phrase in 1848, was actually a communist. So the ideas actually did come out of communism. So communitarianism is a word that people don't know about, but it's the system that they're in. There's no such thing as a world government. There is global governance, which is unstructured, which is totally different. There isn't like one centralized world government. The whole idea of this system was that it was decentralized, but would be imposed in every country. Every country which took on sustainable development in the early 90s is now a communitarian system, because the system of sustainable development, which came out of the Rio Conference in 1992 and from previous documents such as Our Common Future. For instance, you'll hear that Tedros from the World Health Organization, he kept going on about our common future. So let's look at sustainable development. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? But sustainable development means whatever they want it to mean. It is a meaningless term. It's been stripped of its meaning. Sustainable development, in effect, under the communitarian system, is population reduction and control under a technocratic system which surveils everything in real time, called the Internet of Things. And this is what they've been aiming for. So I hope that kind of made sense there. There's a lot more we can go into on that. So when we talk about sustainable development, communitarianism, the big society, which it came out of in 2010, which was on the back of sustainable development, we're talking about the same thing. And what we're talking about is the limiting of language. So in other words, if you want to control people, you limit the amount of words that they use. So you will get these useful idiot politicians, globalists and lobbyists constantly saying resilient, constantly saying sustainable, constantly saying vibrant, and constantly saying diverse. These are communitarian words because they've been stripped of their meaning. For instance, diversity is all about guilt-shaming people into an agenda. It has nothing to do with acceptance. It's actually about intolerance. So these terms have been used and weaponized, and the public are speaking a language that they don't understand most of the time. COVID-19, as you probably know, means certificate of vaccination ID, which is the outcome. So don't look at the inciting incident, which is meant to be a virus. Look at what the outcome is. The outcome is they're telling you where it's going. You will need a certificate of vaccination ID to travel. And this is where it's getting very disturbing. And we've now got a situation where they've locked the world down on the back of something which has no credibility whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And they are merely testing public compliance. And the communitarian system is testing the compliance through mask wearing and through social engineering. I can understand if people haven't got all the coordinates. That's perfectly understandable. What is unforgivable, however, is acquiescence to something that they know nothing about, because they are enabling this. They are compliant with it, and in a way, they're also complicit. And that's the problem. Compliant, complacent, and complicit. And those three words are what makes them good communitarians. Still have their beliefs invested in the system, are the good, compliant, complacent, and complicit communitarians. They are actually the enemy now. So the idea of this system is to co-opt everyone into it. No one will be left behind. That's what the UN have been doing with the Sustainable Development Goals. That's what we hear all the time through all of these newspapers. Everything is presented as something that is good for you. It's for your good. Therefore, it's for the common good of everybody, which takes us back to individual rights being usurped by the rights of the community. And globally, and in any political sense, that's called consensus. Well, there's never been consensus in history. You would never have a consensus. You would have something that was imposed or something that was agreed upon. A consensus is neither of those two things. A consensus is an assumption that's been created on behalf of you as part of a group. So when you hear the word consensus, you can really be sure that you're being manipulated.
That is another way of saying the greater good. That's one of saying think. A groupthink. Would that be fair to say it's kind of groupthink?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned protests earlier on in the introduction, which is quite a good time to bring in Delphi technique and the consensus kind of agenda, which is being implemented at a global and local level. So if you go to your local council meeting, they will be using Delphi technique, which was developed by the Rand Corporation in 1953. The Rand Corporation is still really massive on social engineering, and they do lectures on it, and they have great influence on government. And this is a big part of what I'm talking about as a side issue, in that NGOs and large organizations and steering groups are basically the way that unstructured global governance is implemented in your local community. Yes. And this is what the public still don't understand. They don't understand that global governance usurps national government. Our government has got nothing to do with what's going on. They're lobbyists. They've been bought off. Apart from that, they are there to implement the policies of global governance. A paper produced by the World Health Organization in 2007, Global Public Health Security in the 21st Century. They are describing in 2007 what they did in Wuhan. They are telling you that that is what they're going to do, and anyone who doesn't go along with it is going to be demonized by every other country in a communitarian way. Yeah. There's one agenda that's moving forward. It may look as though it's multipolar, as though lots of things happening. It's not. There's one thing happening, and it's going in one direction. So anybody who gets distracted onto issues of who's doing it, is it this group, is it that group, it doesn't matter, because we've got one system that's coming in. And that is the trick, to understand that, and to understand that protest groups are no different. The protest groups that were allowed in this country were allowed for a very good reason. The intelligence services in this country will not allow anybody to protest if they form a group. So why would they allow these groups, which I looked into and found out they weren't exactly what they were meant to be according to the public image? But I've seen it all before, because I know how everything like this is steered. There's a great example of a real grassroots organization in America called peoplesrights.org. And I've interviewed Casey Whalen and Ammon Bundy, who were part of this group. And of course, they're demonized as the right wing and all the rest of it, and all the crap and all the guilt shaming and all the usual rubbish that is thrown by the communitarian press. But they are a direct threat to this system. And that is what I'm talking about. Protest groups are not a direct threat to anything, because they go out and they say, stand up, take your freedoms back. That means you're already a slave. I never gave my freedoms away. You gave your... These people who are doing this are quite clever, but they're not that clever. This system that's been set up is not clever at all. It's actually incredibly simple, because it has to be simple to be imposed in different countries with different cultures. It can't be complicated. So once you see the template, then that's it. That's why I called one of the shows Template Protest Social Engineers, because the protests are being socially engineered with a template. I saw this in Occupy, and out of that came Climate Camp Action. Climate Camp Action were undercover police who stole the money from Occupy. Climate Camp Action are part of a thing called Green and Black Cross, who get people's solicitors if they get arrested under tyranny. People who've lived under a tyranny can recognise it straight away. Ask any ex-communist what they think of what's going on in the UK. They've seen it all before, maybe in a less sophisticated way, but they know it. They've seen it. They can smell it. It looks like what it is. It's totalitarianism. Benefit. So everything has to be presented as a benefit, or people wouldn't go along with it. So how do you get people to agree to be genocided? Well, you present it as a benefit. You don't say we're going to kill you all, because you're going to get resistance then, aren't you? You co-opt them into feeling that they have a moral duty to do it. And that is what is really, I suppose you could say, evil about it. We're in this global community, and it's enforced in different ways in different parts of the world, but generally it's coming down the same. It really is. And it's not in the Illuminati. It's not, they don't have to go into all that stuff. All they have to do is look at the World Health Organization, the UN, all of its agencies, Imperial College, people like Neil Ferguson, Chris Whitty, look where the money comes from. That's just in this country. Then follow the money elsewhere and look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's very, very simple. For instance, yeah, I mean, if you go back to Rio in '92, you can look at a great video, George Hunt, the elite planner head, UNCED, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. The person who basically invented climate change was a billionaire called Maurice Strong, who used the idea of environmentalism, which was brought forward at the time by people like David Suzuki, Stephen Schneider, and Dave Foreman of Earth First. If you look at what these people were saying, they were asking for a reduced population. They were asking for us to start using less resources. So what happened at Rio in '92, the Earth Summit there, that was a defining moment, because that was when these people decided on that course of action, and they decided that it would go into local governance all over the world in a particular way. So then they came out with this document called Our Common Future, which had been prepared in 1987, but which then got kind of implemented. And that's the blueprint really for communitarianism, the way your local council runs. Everyone in your local council speaks this language. If they don't speak that language, they're not important there. What they are depending on massively is for the public to police each other. Yeah. If the public do not police each other, this system cannot work. There's not enough of them. You've seen that with the lockdowns. But what this system is terrified of is being found out. Because if people find out that all of this pandemic nonsense is nothing to do with a pandemic, and then they start looking at what it is to do with, then that might be a very good start. But because the communitarian system relies on total surveillance. Yeah, it's windowsontheworld.net. We do a new show every Sunday, 9:30 p.m. UK time. Often do a live stream on a Friday or Saturday. Check the web.
Thank you, guys. Head over to glitchinthecode.co.uk. Please share this off of BitChute and YouTube and iTunes and Spotify, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.